Ontario is Canada's southernmost province. It's also Canada's most populous province, and home to major cities such as Toronto, Ottawa, and Hamilton. In fact, as of the 2021 census, Ontario is home to 39% of Canada's entire population. It's the second largest province by size after Quebec, and it's the fourth largest in total jurisdiction area when comparing it to other provinces and territories. But Ontario is so much more than the cities. In fact, it's home to some of the most varied geography in all of Canada. So in this video, we're going to discuss 10 interesting facts about Ontario's geography that you may or may not know. This is Ali, and welcome back to Urban Atlas. So I previously mentioned Ontario's size. It's the second largest province in all of Canada and the fourth largest political entity when comparing it to provinces and territories. But just how large is it really? And that brings us to fact number 1 about Ontario. Ontario covers an area of 1,076,000 square kilometers. That means Ontario just by itself is larger than the countries of France and Spain combined, and it's approximately the same size as the country of Egypt. However, unlike Egypt, Ontario is home to a lot of water. Specifically, it's home to a lot of lakes. And that brings us to fact number 2. You see, Ontario is home to over 250,000 lakes. That means Ontario is blessed with over 20% of the entire world's freshwater supply. And a lot of that is because of the Great Lakes. You see, Ontario holds a portion of all of the Great Lakes except for Lake Michigan. And there's also other large lakes like Lake Nipigon and Lake of the Woods. And of course, there are thousands and thousands of more lakes in Ontario. Now that we're on the topic of water, let's talk about Ontario's interesting fact number 3. Just like the lakes, Ontario also has a seemingly endless supply of rivers. In fact, Ontario is home to approximately 100,000 kilometers of rivers, the longest of which is the Ottawa River. At 1,271 kilometers long, the Ottawa River is the primary tributary for the St. Lawrence River, another famously large river. Interestingly, the rivers in southern Ontario usually feed into the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence River, and then the Atlantic Ocean, whereas the rivers in northern Ontario usually feed into James Bay or Hudson Bay, and eventually the Arctic Ocean. Now for interesting fact number 4, we head to the city of Hamilton. Locally known as the Hammer, Hamilton is a port city located on Lake Ontario. It has a population of approximately 785,000 residents in its metro area. Hamilton is located approximately 45 kilometers southwest of Toronto. Now, what makes Hamilton special is that Hamilton is home to the largest number of waterfalls in an urban area. You see, Hamilton is home to over 100 waterfalls, most of which are located on the Niagara Escarpment, which winds through the entire city of Hamilton. In fact, Hamilton actually used to have more than 100 waterfalls, but they have since dried out because of the construction on top of the Niagara Escarpment. Unfortunately, many of the waterfalls in Hamilton do face issues with water quality, especially the waterfalls in the Chinook and Red Hill watersheds. Some of the better known waterfalls in Hamilton include Webster's Falls, the Devil's Punch Bowl Falls, and Albion Falls. Now, Hamilton is located pretty close to the US border. And that brings us to fact number 5. According to the International Boundary Commission, Ontario and the US share a border of 2,760 kilometers, which is 1,715 miles. But do you know how much of that is actually a land border? Think about it for a second. How many times have you driven from Ontario to the US? And if you have, you've probably crossed over a bridge. Surprisingly, over the 2,700 kilometers of border that the US and Ontario share, only 1 kilometer of that is actually a land border. Here's an exercise. If you're a geography nerd like me, you probably want to do this. Open up Google Maps, look at the border between the US and Ontario, and you'll notice that it keeps going through lakes, rivers, lakes, rivers, lakes, rivers. The only land border that I found that Ontario and the US share is located here in Western Ontario, with this little section bordering the state of Minnesota. Now for fact number 6, let's talk about the parks of Ontario. Ontario is home to 334 provincial parks and 6 national parks. But did you know Ontario is home to Canada's first and only urban national park? That's right, Rouge Park in Toronto is Canada's first urban national park. In addition to being Canada's first urban national park, Rouge Park is also one of the largest urban parks in North America. At 7,500 acres, Rouge Park is a pretty large park when it comes to urban parks. However, it fails in comparison to Ontario's largest park, that being Polar Bear National Park located in the far north of the province. At 2.4 million hectares, this park is massive, and it's only accessible by air. There are no roads leading to Polar Bear Provincial Park. In fact, many communities in the far north of Ontario are not accessible by all-season roads. Now that we're on the topic of Ontario's green spaces, let's talk about Ontario's biodiversity when it comes to its fauna. And that leads us to fact number 7. You see, Ontario is surprisingly biodiverse. With over 30,000 different species, Ontario is one of the most biodiverse provinces in Canada. And this is primarily due to the fact that Ontario has a wide variety of different habitats. From tundra in the north all the way down to the Carolinian forests in the south, Ontario is home to a wide variety of habitats. And this diversity means you can find animals as diverse as polar bears in the north and Massasauga rattlesnakes in the south. Now for fact number 8, let's head to Ontario's Lake Huron. Because Lake Huron is home to a very special island. You see, Lake Huron is home to Manitoulin Island, which is the world's largest freshwater island. With a land area of approximately 2,760 square kilometers, or 1,068 square miles, the island is so large that it itself contains over 100 lakes on it, some of which have their own islands, meaning there are several islands within this big island. Manitoulin Island is home to Lake Manitou, which is actually the largest lake on an island in the entire world. In addition to having over 100 lakes, Manitoulin Island also has 4 major rivers. With a population over 13,000 residents, Manitoulin Island is truly fascinating. But let's leave more of that for another video. And let's move on to fact number 9. For fact number 9, we head to the city of Sudbury. And as we use Google Maps to head to Sudbury, we can notice something quite peculiar. You see, this area is known as the Sudbury Basin, and it is the 3rd largest known impact structure located anywhere on Earth. And the structure is thought to have been formed over 1.8 billion years ago. And because of this, the Sudbury area is rich in elements such as nickel, copper, gold, silver, palladium, platinum, and iridium. Now, the full extent of the Sudbury Basin is thought to be approximately 62 kilometers long and 30 kilometers wide. Now, Sudbury is located in northern Ontario, and that brings us to fact number 10. You see, northern Ontario covers up to 88% of Ontario's total land area. But despite having the vast majority of Ontario's land, northern Ontario only has about 6% of its population. This gives northern Ontario a population density of approximately 1 person per square kilometer. That is an extremely low population density. In fact, it's so low that if Northern Ontario was its own country, it would be the least dense country in the entire world. In fact, the only places that would be less dense than Northern Ontario would be Greenland, which is a self-governing body of Denmark, the Pitcairn Islands, and the Falkland Islands, which are overseas territories of the UK. Yes, it really is that sparsely populated. And it really goes to show the lopsided population distribution patterns that we have here in Ontario. And there you go. Those are 10 interesting facts about Ontario's geography. If you like content like this and you want me to do a similar episode on different provinces and territories within Canada, let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like content like this, remember to subscribe to my channel. It really helps me stay motivated to keep making awesome geography content like this for you guys. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.